Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back, joined live by Tracy Whitmore. Excited to have her here as a social worker, therapeutic coach, and founder of her own company. It's called Indigo Journey, excuse me. She's from Vancouver, but she's helping so many people. So let's start off with a little introduction as to who Tracy is. By the way, it's Tracy with just a Y, no I, no E. So you have it right. And we're going to look for her online. It's indigojourney.co.co. So go ahead, sweetheart. Say hello, and then we'll get to today's topic for sure.
Hi, thanks, Jill. Thanks so much for having me. And it's great to chat with you again today.
Thank you. Same here. Pleasure to have you back. And got to add author. There's a lot to you. So let me have you do the introduction.
Yeah, there is a lot. There is a lot. So like you said, Jill, I'm a social worker, a therapeutic coach, and an author. There's a bunch of other things, but we won't go into all of those today. So the main focus of my work is two areas. One, supporting LGBTQIA plus adults. So I do coaching and therapy, counseling, all of those kinds of things. I deliver some programs, and I also support parents of LGBTQIA plus people so that they can better understand their child's experiences, their own emotions and their own experience, so that they can show up for their child and be their best ally.
Oh, beautiful. And by the way, the title of the book is what?
It's about you too, reducing the overwhelm for parents of LGBTQ plus kids.
Perfect. Oh, and where can we find it?
You can find it in all of the places that you can buy books these days. And of course, on Amazon. You can get it on my website as well.
Perfect.
Which is indigojourney.co/book.
Awesome. So we're working on chapter 3 today, right?
Yeah. I thought that would be a nice fit because it's in light of National Coming Out Day this week on Wednesday. I think the US also celebrates that. There's a few countries around the world that celebrate National Coming Out Day. So I thought chapter 3, which is Parents Come Out Too, would be a great place to focus on this week.
Perfect. Let's talk about it. So yeah, you said in light of National Coming Out Day, which is this week. When is it specifically?
It was on Wednesday.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I heard it on the news. So, okay. All right. Tell us a little bit about that, and let's talk more about parents as well.
Great. So National Coming Out Day, I think, means that some things are a little bit different for different people, but the general idea is to acknowledge and support those people who do have the experience of having to or wanting to come out of the closet. So, there's a whole bunch of things in there where people have their own struggles and the decisions that they need to make about whether or not they do share about themselves. So I think it's an acknowledgement of that, and it's an opportunity for people who are wanting to come out. You can come out at any day, on any day, but it's a time, I guess, that there's more focus, there's more awareness, and hopefully more kind and compassionate discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't we talk about that? Did you ever Google the actor that I told you about? Brian Austin
I did.
Green, by any chance?
Yeah. I had a quick look, and I didn't read the whole article.
That's okay. It was just about an American actor's son who came out, and he was so supportive of it. So I think that's important too, and inviting people in versus coming out. What's the difference with that?
Yeah, so many years ago when I was working with young people, young LGBTQIA plus young people, one of them, well, there's a few of them that talked about it, but one in particular comes to mind who taught me this term, inviting in. And I found out later that lots of people know about it, but it's meaning the same thing. It's sharing about your sexuality or gender identity. However, coming out is, like I mentioned, it's talking about coming out of the closet. So it, for a lot of people, can have a lot of pressure. It can have a feeling of kind of negative connotations around it, like there's something hidden about me that I need to come out and share with the world. Whereas inviting in, to me, when I learned about it, feels so much more comfortable. Like it's really beautiful. I've got a YouTube on it actually. It talks about more about inviting people in that you care about, that are important to you, and sharing something extra about yourself that you haven't shared with them to date. So I feel like it's just much more empowering for people to make that decision of whether or not they want to invite someone in, rather than having
Yeah.
to consider coming out and sharing this thing about themselves.
Interesting. All right, let's continue.
Yeah. So the chapter 3 of my book is talking more about parents coming out, and because parents have to come out too, and for parents, there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of crossovers in the feelings and experiences that queer individuals have when considering coming out or inviting in. And there's also extra layers to that as well. So what I like to share with parents and talk about, because it's often not acknowledged, parents are left to just kind of manage, and they're told, don't talk about your child's sexuality or gender identity without their permission. You know, there's all of these rules and expectations, which are important, I have to say. But also the extra layers that parents have to consider is some of those rules, which is you cannot come out for anybody else, including your child, without their explicit consent. Because at the end of the day, it's your child that has to live the consequences, whatever they may be, once that's done. And once it's done, it can't be taken back. So making sure that you have your child's explicit consent before you share with anybody. And that, when I say explicit consent, it needs to be for the individual that you're planning on sharing with. So it can't be like, your child said, yeah, sure, you can tell Auntie Jo, and then you assume that means you can tell all the aunties, or the whole extended family. It needs to be about each individual person, and that can get tedious both for the parent and the individual. Like, when the parent's going, oh, is it okay if I talk to this person? Is it okay if I talk to that person? And as time goes on, there becomes a lot more clarity, but there still needs to be that consent and checking in for people. So I think that's really one of the most important messages to get across, that we make sure we have that permission from kids or from anyone, that goes for anybody. And then the other things that parents need to consider, so not only that they need to have consent, the extra layer for parents, in addition to what the individual has to experience, is that when you're deciding whether or not you share and you have consent, you then have to consider how this is done and when this is done, which the individual also needs to consider. However, all of those things impact your child, and you don't know exactly what your child is thinking or feeling or experiencing unless you have really open communication about that. And so, you've got your own feelings, but I know parents often worry about if their child's okay, and feel that level of need to protect their child. So whereas their child knows how they feel in any given moment, and knows whether or not they need to be protected or want to be protected, or want a layer of distance between the coming out process or not with people. So it can add a lot more complicating factors, I think, for parents. And of course, that's not to minimize the individual's experience. It's just, a different layer for them that they need to go through.
And
Yeah.
at this time, we just got to remind everyone of how we can reach you. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah. Yeah. So my website, indigojourney.co, no M on the end. And I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's tracy.indigojourney. It's Tracy, like you said, Jill, before. No I, no E.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. What other things do we need to consider about these boundaries and different scenarios?
Yeah. So the boundaries that I talk about with parents is, both between themselves, so having their own boundaries around the communication with other people and having boundaries with their child. And the boundaries with their child is more about, so having that communication with the child, if your child wants somebody to know the information, but you're not ready to talk about it yet, then, we need to have more in-depth communication. Because the other thing that I make sure that parents understand is that they have no obligation, and nor does their child have any obligation to share this information with anybody, no matter who they are. It all is down to when the child is ready and who they're comfortable with knowing. And then once you have that information, who the parent is comfortable with knowing as well. Now, if a child wants to share with, say, I don't know, Uncle Fred, I don't know where I'm coming up with these
That's
names,
okay.
but
It's okay.
Uncle Fred, and mum is not comfortable with it, then the child's, I guess, preference is overriding the parents, because it's their information to share at the end of the day. However, if the child is asking the parents to share that information with Uncle Fred, then it is okay for the parents to say, look, I'm not really comfortable yet to have that conversation with Uncle Fred. And that would be more of a conversation with the child. And some of the reasons for that can be, and I think, really valid and important to acknowledge and to pay attention to, is that if the parent's not fully comfortable and haven't worked through their own process around their child's sexuality or gender identity, then the way that they share with Uncle Fred or anybody else is going to be impacted. And they may not feel equipped to be the ally or the advocate for their child, or they might not have the answers to the questions that they feel like they might need to answer. And so then that can make the whole situation a lot more difficult, and sometimes, the outcomes are not as good. So that's one thing that I, talk about, those boundaries. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things depending on each individual situation, and that's a topic of conversation that I go into in my coaching programs, or if I'm just working one-on-one with people, is like, how do we set those boundaries, or how do we figure out what they are first? What makes you feel the most comfortable, and then how do we communicate those and stick to them? And that leads on to this no obligation, do this in your own time. Often people have this misconception that, oh, but I have to tell my partner because I know now, and so my partner really should know, or, your grandparents deserve to know, or, your siblings deserve to know. And I understand where that opinion or that feeling comes from. However, the reality is that nobody has the right to know that information before the individual is ready to share it. And I feel like when I'm working with parents around this, and we go into detail around particular, family dynamics and situations that they're concerned about, the feedback that I get is that it's quite freeing. And the same as when I'm working with LGBTQA plus individuals, they're often feeling this pressure. Oh, I've told this person, so I really have to tell this other person. And again, whilst I understand that that feeling, that need, it's also not true. Nobody has a right to that information until an individual is ready. And that includes, the parent doesn't have to, so that person can have the information if your child is ready, but a parent is not, there isn't an obligation on a parent to share that information until they're ready and comfortable. And when I'm working with LGBTQIA plus individuals and they're talking about wanting their parent to share the information, say with grandma or, you know, extended family, and they're frustrated because their parents are saying no or not yet or are not comfortable and they're struggling with it, then I work with them to also be able to understand that it's in their best interest as well if their parent waits until they are, I guess, better equipped to have those conversations.
Well, and it's different for everyone, right? Because sometimes it takes
Exactly.
time with different family members, and could you share some examples of some of the clients you've worked with without using their names, but just, what they've gone through and
Sure.
how you've been able to help and how they're able to communicate this through to their family?
Yeah, thank you. Sure. So the the different scenarios that people have, I mean, there's more than this, but some of the main ones that I talk about is grandparents, extended family members, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and then other spaces like sporting clubs and churches or places of faith and clubs and, you know, different areas that people socialize. So some of the scenarios that I could share with you, I remember a family that I was working with that the young person really wanted their parents to tell the grandparents, and the grandparents were really reluctant to do that because they didn't feel like the grandparents would take it very well. And this was new information to the parents. And so the work that we did was around supporting. I was working directly with the parents at that time, and the parent I was supporting the parents to communicate with the young person that it's not that we're not going to tell the grandparents, it's a not yet, and that's really important. And having conversations with their child, supporting their child to understand that the parents wanted to be really well equipped to have the conversation with the grandparents because they were concerned that the grandparents might not respond as well as they might like, that, you know, they're from a different generation and they have a different
Yeah.
understanding and all of that. So, and then the work was revolved around how do we communicate with the grandparents?
Okay.
So we want to look into is it important for the grandparents to know? It seems to be for the child, so we need to honor that. And, you know, in what way and how much information do they need to have? And then what information do we want to make sure that they have so that they have the best opportunity to respond in the best possible way as well? And
Hmm.
I've done that kind of work a lot with parents because, you know, grandparents are of a different generation and
Hmm.
often they do find it a little bit more difficult to hear this information, and it can be a real cause for conflict in families sometimes. So you know, that's one of the situations. Another one that comes to mind that is a very common one is when a child comes out to one parent and doesn't want the other parent to be told yet,
Oh, how do you
or
handle
the
that? Hmm.
partner, whether it, yeah, so sometimes it's the partner and or the other parent, and that can be really difficult because, you know, it brings up a whole bunch of things. The parent that's been informed wants to be honest with their partner, and
Yeah.
they feel like there's an obligation for that um, the other parent or the partner to know. And, you know, again, I'll reiterate, there isn't an obligation, and they don't have a right to know until your child is ready. However, I acknowledge that it's a really difficult secret to hold.
Yeah.
And so the work I do there is supporting the parent to work with their child around getting to a place where they can feel comfortable and safe to share with the other parent or partner, And in that process, it's really important to understand on a deep level what their hesitation is, what the reluctance is. And sometimes it's quite surface level, and it's more just, I'm not ready to tell another person yet. I just want to get used to having and see how this goes. And in other circumstances, it can be actually quite serious, and they're really concerned for their safety and well-being. And while you might not think that that's a concern, we have to honor what the child is feeling, because again, once you share that information, however it turns out, we can't take that information back. And the other part of that is that for the child's relationship with your partner or their other parent, for that relationship, it's really important that they can get to a place where they can actually feel comfortable enough to tell that parent or have that information shared with that parent on their own terms. Sure, the other parent might feel a little upset. I've had, quite a few situations where I've worked with parents around this, and the other parent is upset until they have all the information. And usually, not always, but usually once they have all the information and they understand the process that both the child and the parent who got the information first has been through in order to share with them, they're usually pretty grateful and understanding, at the very least, that this needed to be a process. Almost always one parent is told first.
Got it.
And almost always somebody else other than the parents are told first. And it can be hard to not be the first person. But the way that I like to support those parents through that process is understanding that it's not a reflection of your relationship with your child. There are a bunch of different reasons why they all tell somebody else before they'll tell you. And none of it is, well, almost none of it is related to your relationship with them. It doesn't mean that one relationship is better or stronger or anything else. In fact, it can mean quite the opposite.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we got 3 minutes left here, and I know we had some great conversation. Again, for those that were tuning in, or just tuning, I should say, as a transformational coach and author, Tracy Whitmore is her name, and she's been here talking about well, a lot that goes into coming out to a family member, to a friend, or however you want to word it. Could be, like you said, inviting them, right, to talk about it. And it's in her book. It's about you too. And this is the third chapter in the book, right?
Yep. A whole chapter dedicated to this topic.
Got it. But overall, you're here to help reduce the stress and overwhelm of those in the community, no matter, what part of the community, right, that they're in, LBG. Could you say it for me? The full
LGBTQIA plus.
To IA.
LGBTQIA plus.
The IA plus.
I know I say it too
new
fast.
To me, so I'm sorry. That's the one I forget.
Don't be.
So again, her book, indigojourney.co, and you can go there and also get the book as well. And did you want to share any other insight for our last 2 minutes together?
Yeah, thanks, Jill. So I offer a variety of programs, from entry level, that is just teaching the foundations and the basics around sexuality, gender identity, what that means for your child, what it means for you as a parent, right through to a program that I spoke about last time, which is Reconnecting Families, which supports parents to really dig deep into what they're feeling and experiencing so that they can learn about their child's experience, but more so about their own experience, and work through any of the struggles and some of the underlying things that might be fueling some of their struggles or their avoidance or reluctance to have conversations and all of those things. So they eventually get to the end of that program fully celebrating and embracing their child for exactly who they are. And it makes such a big difference in families. So there's a whole range of programs that I offer, and as well as a program called Transform Your Heart, which is for anybody. So whether you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community, whether you're a parent or whether you're not connected as far as you know at all, that's more about connecting with self on a deeper level.
Well, thank you so much for being here again, Tracy. Remind us how we can reach you.
Yep, so you can reach me at indigojourney.co with no M on the end. And that's my website, and my book's also available there. And Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, tracy.indigojourney.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you back, and have a
Thanks so
fantastic
much,
day
Jill.
and enjoy your weekend. Thank you again,
Thank
sweetheart.
you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.